Christian Gonzalez falls to them, and people just convince themselves like, well, hey, you know what? We were out. You know what? Not what we wanted, but great player. Can't be mad at the player. I mean,
Basically an hour.
Okay, we'll keep it under an hour. I want today's to be kind of lighthearted. What is this? This is for Sunday, April the 23rd. Welcome into the Hot Read podcast for Sunday, April 23rd. I'm your host, Easton Freeze, director of published content here at Broadway Sports Media. We're also brought to you by the 440 Podcast Network, and I am joined, as always, by producer JT. JT, how are you? Happy Sunday. We don't usually do shows on Sunday, but here we are.
Yeah, not a lot of time left until the draft, so you kind of, country folk got to make do. And in this case, we are the country folk making do. You
got to make hay while the sun shines, and the sun is shining on this pre-draft period. Not much longer. We are nearing dusk as we get closer and closer. Now just 5 days away, a little under 5 days away from the first round of the 2023 NFL Draft. And so today, JT, we're going to cover two topics. Actually, three. We've got one that I feel compelled to address here at the top very briefly, and then we're going to talk about a survey that I did on Twitter this week that I'm sure a number of you listening participated in, and I thank you for your participation, on what the preference is. I was trying to get the consensus for Titans fans as to what the preference is for folks for first round outcomes. What do people want to see the Titans do in the first round? And so I put together a list of what I felt was the 10 most likely scenarios. I feel like these 10 options encompass pretty much every possible scenario, save a few very off the board random things that wouldn't happen, like the Titans drafting a kicker in the first round. But I put these in a list and had people respond with their ordered, itemized list of preferences, how they would like these things to happen in order. Took that, made a data set, calculated the consensus on what people want, and we now have those numbers, and we'll talk about that, and then you and I can discuss whether or not we agree or disagree with how the consensus came together. We also are going through a list. The main portion of today's show is do and don't draft players in each round. So JT, you and I have gone through and made lists, partially separate and then partially putting our heads together for some of the later round guys, of players that we think, and this is from a Titans perspective, but we also think these are just good players in general and bad players in general, what you should and shouldn't be looking for the Titans to do in each round at key positions. We focused in on linemen, receivers, potential defenders, potential tight ends, the things that you are going to expect the Titans to be looking at in this draft. So that's exciting. JT, off the top, though, we have to start with a bit of a rumor going around on Twitter this morning, and we're recording on Saturday around midday. There's been a little bit of a underground panic in the deep, dark corners of Titans Twitter, but folks are panicking. What are they panicking over?
Derrick Henry is going to the Eagles. So
is are we sure about that?
The snatching of just good offensive weapons by Howie Roseman continues to apparently happen.
The Titans are the AAA team. They are the AAA.
They are the feeder team for the.
They are the feeder
Eagles,
team
apparently.
for the Philadelphia Eagles. Jeffrey Simmons apparently is going there. Derrick Henry's going there. I mean, shoot, Kevin Byard, pack your bags, buddy. You're headed on. Ryan Tannehill did a great backup to Jalen Hurts, who just got the bag. Just sending all the talent up there. Chig, great young guy. You can utilize him. This is something that I've had people in my DMs this morning, JT, and now into the afternoon, saying, Easton, say it isn't so. Say it's not true. Please tell me this is an inaccurate report. Let's take a deep breath. All right. It's something that I'm in a precarious situation with here, JT, because I can't say to you what I want to say, which is relax. It's not a real report. It's baloney. It's bogus. It's nonsense. I can't say that because I don't have definitive countervailing evidence that disproves this. Like, I've not heard from any sources in the Titans building. I've not seen or heard any reporting other than my own that indicates it's an inaccurate report. The only thing I can say, and the reason why I want to be able to say that to you, is because when I put my opinion hat on and my logic hat on, this is something that shouldn't really scare you, because it doesn't make a lot of sense from any angle, right? Just from the perspective of who posted this, a former NFL Network analyst. Now he's a guy broadcasting for American Ninja Warrior, and so he's like tangentially related to the NFL, but not really anymore. He's posting it as without sourcing. Apparently, his tweet references no sourcing. It's at 3 a.m. on a weekend. It doesn't make any sense for that to be the way that he's breaking actual news. It also doesn't make any sense from a team building perspective. Howie Roseman he's like at the bottom of the list of guys in the league that you would expect to want to spend a lot of money or a lot of capital in a trade for an aging running back. That's not really king of the nerds MO. Like, that's not the way that he's operating. I'm struggling to like even think it's just not the way Howie Roseman's built. Like his DNA, his track record does not align with that, especially after they went and got Rashad Penny from the Seahawks this past offseason. They filled their running back room out. They've got 3 guys in a stable there that they like, from a team building perspective, from a roster building perspective, it's already set. So none of this makes any sense. Can I say for sure he's not being traded and he's not being traded to Philadelphia? No. There's a snowball's chance in hell that this is something that's real, but it is a snowball's chance in hell, and it's very hot down there. So I don't like the snowball's chances. I don't think this is something that you should really be concerned about. Is it worth monitoring? Like, maybe stuff it in the back of your brain? And is the possibility of Derrick Henry being traded at some point real? Yeah, it's real. I just don't think it's very likely. And I don't think that this is reason to suddenly become concerned all of a sudden that Derrick Henry is on the move in the next couple of days. So there's my rant on that. Again, maybe it changes. Maybe this is a rant, very strange. I'll tell you this, JT, if this turns out to be true, it's the weirdest major news break for an NFL star that we may have ever seen, because it doesn't make any sense at all. So that's that. Let's talk about this poll that I did, JT. So I tweeted out this past week a list of 10 scenarios that I think are the most likely or all-encompassing of all the different outcomes for the Titans in the first round. And I asked folks on Twitter to reply with their numbered, or I numbered each scenario and wanted them to reply with their numbered list from best to worst case scenario in their opinion. I took those responses, put them into a data set, and created the consensus response. So weighted each ranking, and the lower score got the better seating. It's proprietary. Don't even question the math. All right, it checks out. I promise. This is a basic ranking system here. We've got the graphic, right, JT? Can we throw that up really quick? If you're watching on YouTube, we've got this up so you can take a look at it. But these were the 10 scenarios in order, ranked from best case scenario to worst case scenario, according to 150 responses from a random selection of Titans fans on Twitter. So for pretty obvious reasons, JT, the number one overall by a significant margin outcome is the Titans coming away with either CJ Stroud or Anthony Richardson at the 11th overall pick. Now, I think you and I, in terms of our rankings, that's the obvious best case scenario. You get quarterback 2 or 3 in this draft, according to most, at your original position. You don't have to move, give up any capital to go get them. That's great. That's awesome. It's the least likely thing to happen on this list, I think. I think every other option is more likely to happen than this. But if any of the smoke we've heard from the past week is true, and these quarterbacks are going to fall further than we think, maybe this happens. Do you agree that this is the obvious best case scenario?
No, I think so. I was saying no as in like
no,
the Midwestern,
yes, no.
the Midwestern,
yeah.
Like, no, yeah, I get it. Like,
no,
guilty as charged.
Exactly. Exactly.
If you look at the list here, and we'll talk about all of them, you see, like, besides Will Levis down at the bottom of this, you see a pattern of like the Titans getting their preferred player at 11 without having it's a case of having Titans fans having their cake and eating it,
and eating it too. Right.
Yeah, like you're trying to get your best player without giving up the capital to go down to the 3rd overall and get one of those top quarterbacks, right? So like it's
Right,
very
because
logical in my mind, like of how they would do this. Like, yeah, of course you would want the best player and not have to move down.
No, I think that they got it mostly right, which is what I think you're alluding to. There's a couple of things I might change that we'll talk about in a second, but you're right. Half of these options were for a specific player at the 11th pick without the Titans having to move. And 4 of those 5 were the top 4 rated options, with Will Levis being dead last, because the most obvious, the most unanimous results, like there were a lot of differing opinions I got, but the most consensus opinion that I got, not shockingly, is if the Titans even glance in the direction of Will Levis, if the thought of Will Levis even crosses Ran Carthon's mind on Thursday, April 27th, there may be tar and feathering. We might have to bring it back. Like that was the sentiment, that we may have to get the pitchforks out and light the torches, because there will be an angry mob in Nashville at the Titans facility, Matt and Mike and Rand, for even considering Will Levis if they do that. But outside of him, at 11, getting one of the top guys is the obvious, clear option here. And JT, the other thing that I found most interesting about this is how there was a pretty clear demarcation between what was an acceptable above average outcome in folks' minds and what was a below average outcome. Because, these were ranked 1 through 10 by folks. I gave them an average aggregate rating. The top overall rated outcome, getting Stroud or Richardson at 11, came out with an average of 2.6. So the second and a half spot on the average person list, whereas Will Levis at 11th and dead last came out at 8.68. So roughly the 8th or 9th best outcome on the average person's list. We have 6 of these responses with a grade lower than 5. So above the median. And we have 4 of them that are above a 7, right? So 7 or higher, and then 5 or lower. There's a massive gap between what is good and what is bad. And it's pretty much down the line of, we want one of the top guys at 11, trade down, or if you're going to trade up, it has to be for CJ Stroud. Like, those were the outcomes that were positive from best to worst. Number 1, getting Stroud or Richardson at 11. Number 2, getting Jackson Smith and Jigba at 11. Number 3, getting Paris Johnson Jr. at 11. Number 4, getting Skoronski at 11. Number 5, trading down. And number 6, trading up to get CJ Stroud at 3. Do you agree that those are the 6 best options? I think that maybe 7 should be lumped in there for me personally, but what do you say?
I think it's good, and we're going to talk about this later. Like, if you're at 11, I think the 2 best offensive line prospects to get are Paris Johnson Jr. and Peter Skoronski on my board.
Sure. Yeah.
Drafting another offensive lineman there instead of those 2 would probably be lower on my board, and that's why I like where trade down is. Like, I kind of really like the board, because it's like your best quarterback's there. If not, I've kind of been JSN pilled into at 11. They should take JSN.
Same. No, I'm with you. Yeah.
And then like Paris Johnson and Peter Skoronski. However, the next option after that, if none of those were available, is I would trade down and then I'd be okay with taking another one of those offensive linemen, or taking a best available defender, but only if they trade down to get more picks in this draft.
So you're saying that you would prefer having another one of the linemen at 11, or getting a defender and trading down over trading up for one of the top quarterbacks?
Yes.
Okay. And see, that's what's interesting to me. I agree that and really kudos to the public for getting the positional value 101 here correct, because it really is. They've ordered it in the order that you'd think about in the modern NFL positional value. Like, hey, let's get the best quarterback. If not, let's get the best receiver. If not, let's get the best bona fide tackle. If not, let's get the best bona fide lineman. If not, let's trade down, because those are really the only position that is truly worth the first round pick each and every time in the eyes of the nerds is an edge player. And that's the only position that they've left off here for obvious reasons. So I think that they nailed that. The most interesting thing to me, JT, was despite this past week, and maybe this is a wake-up call for guys like you and I who are deeply entrenched in, the ebbs and flows of the draft media market, where folks to the minute think players are, trending up, trending down, things coming out about guys, teams are reportedly higher or lower. We get these things, and there's this consensus mental perception of where guys are trending. And this past week, you would say that the stock for CJ Stroud has kind of plummeted, And you'd say the past couple of weeks, the stock for Anthony Richardson has done nothing but climb and climb and climb to the point where it seems like a number of folks have made him their quarterback 1 or 2. I think that some folks really do regard him as the best guy in this class. And yet in this ranking, people's priors are kind of either lagging behind. Maybe the average fan isn't quite caught up to that narrative switch, or maybe they're just resistant to it. Maybe the past week has been, that was just, to me, I think it was kind of an echo chamber moment for me, JT, getting a zoom out perspective of, oh, maybe it's not as serious as it seemed this past week for those two guys' stocks flip-flopping, because clearly in the eyes of the fans, it hasn't.
Yeah, and I think maybe at a Titans perspective, you'd rather have a guy who, regardless of his stock or not, maybe in the eyes of a common fan, you could see him starting more sooner than like Anthony Richardson could for the Titans, and maybe that's where that comes from.
Yeah, and maybe that could absolutely be the case if folks aren't crazy about a project, and that's how they perceive Anthony Richardson. I can totally see that, because that and this is what we're talking about here. CJ Stroud and Anthony Richardson at the 3rd overall pick, trading up for one of those guys, is the line of demarcation here. Stroud, in the eyes of the public, is an above average outcome with a 4.88 average ranking. And Anthony Richardson at 1.3 is a below average outcome of a 7.13 average ranking. So clearly folks aren't crazy about that. And just for those of you that are listening only, but I do recommend this segment has to be easier to consume if you're looking at the board with us on YouTube. The 4 below average outcomes that people were not crazy about, that they gave an average of 7 to 8.5, almost 9. It's Anthony Richardson at the 3rd overall pick. The 8th outcome was drafting another lineman at 11. 9th was getting the best available defender, which I think is if folks are really wanting to worry, if you're worried about one of these 4 things coming true, I kind of think that this is the one that absolutely has a significant chance of happening. I think that if you told me, JT, if you came from a week from the future, you travel back in time and you said, hey, Easton, after the first round, Titans fans are really mad, and you didn't tell me why, my clear number one guess would be they took a defender, didn't they? Because it just feels like, doesn't it feel like Vrabel is absolutely liable to do it if the cards fall in a certain way?
Because like the with how many quarterbacks are like projected to go in the top 10, there's gonna be blue chip defensive prospects who are there at 11 that they could
I actually think that there are more. I think there are more blue chip defenders top to bottom in this class. Like I think that if you step away from viewing this class from through a Titans lens and focusing just on offense for the most part, step back and view the draft wholesale, like you and I have been trying to do for the past couple of months. The top of the defensive class is arguably better than the top of the offensive group.
It definitely is. I think there's
cornerbacks, edges, linemen,
defensive interior guys. There are maybe 7 or 8 of them that should be in the top 10, whereas I would put maybe the 1 or 2 or 3 offensive guys in the top 10.
The offensive guys, it's really the quarterbacks, the top linemen or 2, end of list. Like that's really who's justified to be up there. And then you've got like Jahmyr Gibbs, Willie, maybe not, maybe. Receivers, are people going to overdraft him? It seems like it's going to be an overdraft if you go up for him. So it's all the dynamics. I find this kind of thing super interesting. I appreciate people indulging me nerding out a little bit with this consensus, but I do think it is valuable to kind of see, and we'll be able to reference this, JT, and we can even hold it against folks, because people are liable to change their opinions based on how the draft goes. For example,
the next slide, we have all the data. Look at this.
Well, I did crunch the numbers. I've got the screenshots.
We have the number.
But go back to the other slide, JT, because I absolutely can foresee a scenario in which, like, JSN and Paris Johnson Jr. are both there at 11, and the Titans take Paris Johnson Jr. and folks get upset because relative to the opportunity cost of getting JSN, they're pissed off. And we can just point to this and be like, you said this was going to be you said you liked this outcome. You said you liked it. You can't change your mind now. And the inverse, if they go get a defender, if they, Christian Gonzalez falls to them and people just convince themselves like, well, hey, you know what? We were out, not what we wanted, but great player. can't be mad at the player. I mean, you weren't going to be happy with this. You can't change your opinion now. So I do like that we can hold this against folks now, and hopefully we won't have to. Hopefully the Titans come up with one of these top 5. If you were to give it, put a number on it right now, odds of the Titans, the odds of the Titans going with one of the 6 preferred options here, as opposed to one of the 4 negative options. Do you think it's 50-50, 60-40? What's more likely?
I'm going to put it at like 45-55 that they go.
Higher odds they go.
Higher odds they go with the bottom of the board or something else.
So slightly more likely they
we
take
just
people
don't
off.
know. We don't know.
More likely. I'm gonna be slightly more optimistic. I'll go 60-40, 60% chance they please people. But maybe that is me being a wishful thinker. Whatever the case, it's gonna be an exciting night. So can't wait for that. Let's talk about maybe if folks are wanting to game plan a little bit for what they want to see the Titans do throughout the entire draft. We have got a list that we've put together of players, or in some cases, a couple of players in each round at each position of need for the Titans that we think they should and should not be interested in. And we're just going to briefly touch on them. JT, you and I might end up writing this up a little bit to make a joint article for next week. I think this would make it a pretty decent article. So that may be something you see on BroadwaySportsMedia.com. But if not, we'll talk through the reasons why here. And for the first 3 rounds, at least, I know you and I both have our own example. We went and drafted a do and don't player each for each round in each position. So the only quarterbacks we're going to talk about are the first round quarterbacks. I don't think it's worth mentioning beyond that. We do have do and don't draft guys here at the top. And JT, I'll let you go first. I'll concede the floor to you. Who is the quarterback you think the Titans should be interested in drafting in the first round, and who do you think they should not be interested in drafting in the first round?
I'm going to go with the most athletic prospect and the least athletic prospect here. They should draft Anthony Richardson because, like we talked about on the show on Friday with Sean McAvoy, dude is just an athletic freak. I think that now the public might not want a project, but I don't think it's a terrible idea to draft Anthony Richardson, let him sit a year behind Ryan Tannehill and just reap the benefits of that. I think if there's a guy that you can maybe get, because we just don't know what's going to happen, but if you can not give up the most capital in the world to go and get an Anthony Richardson to sit behind Ryan Tannehill for the next year, I think that's the quarterback that they have to go out and get. Now or were you going to say something?
No, go ahead. Yeah, get both of them out of the way.
On the inverse of that, don't draft Will Levis. If there's a quarterback that's also going to be a prospect that I would not want to sit behind Ryan Tannehill, it's Will Levis. I think that Will Levis is maybe got a ceiling of Ryan Tannehill with not the athletic upside. So if you want Ryan,
I give him a higher. I think his ceiling is like Matthew Stafford. I think it's Matthew Stafford. The problem is his floor is what you want is Matt Stafford. What you're afraid of is Carson Wentz throwing left-handed pick sixes in his own end zone like that. Yes. That's the low end, and that's a pretty low end that you're really terrified of getting with Will Levis. So yeah.
So if they were to draft Will Levis in the first round, that is the quarterback I would like them to take. To not take. Right. I agree with both of those. With Richardson, it is. You kind of nailed the 2 projects, right? You took both of the guys that are considered more project-y of these top 4, and you said, this is the guy worth trying with, and this is the guy that's not even, just don't bother. Don't even try. It's like this Lego set, I'm sure, has all the pieces. This one, you might get to the end of the project and be sorely disappointed. It's like a knockoff Chinese version that you buy on AliExpress or something like that.
This is a really niche reference, but it's did you ever go yard sailing with your mom and you'd find a Lego set or some kit that you're like, I want this, but I'm terrified. It's been opened, it's been used. I'm terrified it's not going to have all the pieces, or it's a puzzle.
You're going to get ripped off. I don't want to. Yeah.
I don't want to put in 3 hours worth of work.
Yeah,
exactly. Just to get to the end and be like, I'm missing 2 pieces, and that's just going to kill me. So that is what Will Levis is to me. He's the yard sale Lego set that you're terrified to buy because it might not have all the pieces. The 2 guys that I think they should and should not draft at the quarterback position in the first round are pretty obvious now that we have knocked 2 of them off, and one of them is the perceived number 1 overall pick, so he's not really available. CJ Stroud is the guy they should draft. And the past week has been a strange and suspiciously timed smear campaign against CJ Stroud. Apparently, he's a big dum-dum who tests very poorly when it comes to cognitive processing speed on his S2. Apparently, he's a total flake who just hates the Mannings, football royalty, and decided to opt out of their passing camp. These are things that are, first of all, there's a reason they're coming out now, and we've not heard about them this entire time. And there's a reason why this kind of thing happens in the week leading up to the draft. Teams that want guys to fall and think there's a chance they could. And with CJ Stroud, with all these quarterbacks, you don't know, there's a chance that they fall. A team like the Titans that wants him to fall and Mike could get him at 6 or 7 instead of having to go up to 3 are going to put out these kinds of things. And so I think that it's more likely that this is a targeted campaign to get a guy to fall than it is a concern. I still think that he is the quarterback 2 in this class and absolutely worth pursuing. The quarterback that is not worth pursuing, and this is going to tick off any Titan/Vol fans, but it's the truth, and anybody with eyes knows it's the truth. Do not draft Hendon Hooker in the first round. Now, if you're a team like the Seahawks or the Saints or whoever that might consider drafting him in the first round, fine, knock yourself out, have fun, do it in the late 20s, and you're probably still going to regret it. If you're a team like the Titans who needs quarterback play, needs it soon, and needs it with a certain amount of certainty, if you're going to be drafting at the 11th overall pick, you can't just be throwing that draft pick away on a guy you're not sure about. How can you be sure about Hendon Hooker, who was a man amongst boys at his age in college, was a guy that is coming off of a late season ACL tear last year. You don't know how physical he's going, or how physically capable he's going to be in the running game when he gets healthy. You don't know when he's going to be healthy. He can't contribute in this first year. Like, there's so many reasons not to draft Hendon Hooker. I think ultimately the smoke on him is just that smoke. But if he is being considered by teams in the top 15, the Titans best not be one of them. All right, JT, let's talk about the receivers in the first round that we do and don't want. Let's both knock out our do's, and then we'll both do our don'ts. I've decided after one attempt, I don't like it that way. So the guy that I think the Titans should draft in the first round, I went off the board, kind of didn't want to go with the status quo here. Gave you the status quo. Sorry, but at least it's an easy assignment. I'm going Zay Flowers. If JSN is not available and the Titans really, really want a receiver, folks would be upset if they went with Zay Flowers in 11. I would not. I'm very high on him. He is my wide receiver 2. I think that JSN and Zay Flowers are in a tier of their own in this wide receiver class, and the rest of the group is below them. I think those two are in the same area code in terms of talent, and I truly do think Zay Flowers, despite some size concern, can be an outlier that works in the NFL. Now, it's riskier. There's more reason to be concerned because of the size outlier element of it. The fact that he's coming from a smaller school, the fact that you've not seen him play with a super accurate or talented quarterback. But I think that is a great reason to trust that he's going to succeed if he was able to succeed with such a horrible level of quarterback play in college. I think that he's going to succeed in a big way at the NFL, and I think that he's capable of playing in the slot, and I think you can play him outside. I think this guy can be a flanker if you want him to, and despite his size, I think that he's just shifty enough, crafty enough to get open on a regular basis. So I'm a big fan of Zay Flowers. JT, who do you think they should consider in the first round?
I think they should consider Puka Nacua. No, they should. The overdraft
of the century.
They should target JSN because
Sure.
and this really isn't that hard. He's the best route runner in the class. He's got the best ball skill. He is undoubtedly the best wide receiver in this class, and he most likely, depending on how the quarterbacks fall, has a really good chance to be there at 11. I think if you want to instantly upgrade this wide receiver room for the Tennessee Titans, you go with JSN. JSN takes your room from maybe the bottom 2-3 to maybe like closer to the top 20, maybe like that. Like, it's not going to fix
around
all
the
your
median in the league. You're around median. I'd say it's
you're not. Group. It's not going to fix all of your problems, but it's going to give you a good head start on them. Yeah,
no, I agree. Now, the guy that I don't want them to draft in the first round, I went with Johnston, 6'3", 208 pounds. On paper, a lot to love about this guy. I don't love the way that he utilizes that size. We've talked about this at length in past episodes. He doesn't play like he's as big as he is. He doesn't leverage that body weight, that length, that reach, that usual physical advantage that he's got up against most every cornerback he faces. He doesn't use it to his advantage in a way that he should. Now, at the NFL level, can he develop and learn to do that better? Yeah, I think so. And this guy is maybe the best yak threat in this entire draft class at any position. Once he's got the ball in his hands, he's electric. I'm just concerned about being able to get the ball in his hands. And also from a Titans perspective, it would be a bit redundant. You're not going to be playing him inside or in the slot much. And with Traylon Burks on your team, you don't need another big-bodied X that plays this style of ball. So there are other receivers that I think are worth considering for the Titans that are more complementary to what you already have.
My do not draft wide receiver. If the Titans were to draft Jordan Addison at 11, we would have some problems here.
Yeah, riot time for sure.
A guy who has struggled in the past with injuries. Now, you might say, well, JSN also has struggled with injuries. Yeah, but JSN has the talent and the route running ability that Jordan Addison just has not shown. He showed it. He's shown it before, and the speed. He's shown it in flashes, but it's just not consistent. There's a lot of red flags with him. His numbers last year, especially with contested catching, 22.2% contested catch rate last year. No, thank you. That is why I do not want him.
Yeah, he's a guy that the biggest thing for me is that speed. I don't think you can be that size and that speed combo and be that high of a draft pick. I don't think that you can be a true first round threat if you are that small, and because he's not even 180 pounds and he's got north of 4.5 speed. That's just not a great combo for me. Now let's talk about the linemen. I'll defend the guy that I've been defending this whole time in the first round. If you're looking for a bona fide tackle like the Titans arguably should be, Paris Johnson's your guy. But if he's not there, I absolutely think Peter Skoronski is worth taking at 11. I think that there is a fair chance that he can contend at the NFL as a tackle, as evidenced by the fact that against in college on tape, the best NFL tackle or pass rushers that we've seen come out of the Big Ten in the past couple of years, he won against in college on a regular basis. The Aiden Hutchinsons of the world, like he beat them at the tackle position in college, and now we're seeing guys like Aiden Hutchinson dominate at the NFL level. I think that all of his tape indicates this guy can play tackle. The length concerns are concerning, and the track record is concerning. It would be an outlier bet, but I think at worst you've got an incredible guard for the next 10 years, a Pro Bowl caliber guard. So go get Peter Skoronski, throw him into the battle in camp. Let he and Andre Dillard fight it out for that left tackle spot, and the loser of the battle gets the left guard spot, and you've got a great shored up left side of your line. I have no problem with that at all. I think Skoronski is worth taking at 11 if the cards fall in that way.
The Titans, if Peter Skoronski isn't there, should take Paris Johnson Jr. because if one of them goes, there's a good chance the other one is going to be there. I've been singing his praises ever since the combine.
JT, sorry to interrupt. Do you think just while we're here, what do you think there's good odds, better than not, that there will be one of these two guys that are available at 11? I don't think it's likely both are there, but I think that there's a slightly better than not chance that at least one of them is there at 11.
I think there's one of them there. I think Chicago is definitely a front runner to take one of those guys.
It would take Atlanta going off the board and taking a tackle, which is possible. Maybe yes. Seattle, but I don't see both tackles going. Maybe somebody trades up.
But then we have the wild card of the Eagles where Howie Roseman loves to trade back down. But I could also see with the Eagles being there, a wide receiver needy team going up at 10 to take Jackson Smith and Jigba or something like that. So I think there's a decently good chance that one of these guys is there. And the guy who has the most just absolute explosiveness out of this offensive line group, it's Paris Johnson. If you go back and look at the tape, the dude is already shuffling back and getting into his position like maybe 2.5 seconds before the defense can even react. Like this dude is just quick on his feet. He was an absolute standout at the combine, and his pro day continued. He also just has a lot of leadership qualities that I think he could bring to this very, very inexperienced offensive line group here in Tennessee. That's why I think Paris Johnson would be the guy to go with at 11.
Let's talk about the guys that we don't think they should draft. I'll go first, and this one is I'm gonna fence sit the heck out of this one because I like this guy a lot. But in the past week, we have gotten some information that is concerning on him. It's Darnell Wright out of Tennessee. And there was a report, and I don't have it pulled up in front of me, but I'll just paraphrase. There was a report that has been circulated this past week from an anonymous scout in the NFL talking about him from a character perspective. And it's concerning. All right. Well, actually, here it is. I found the actual report. It was a tweet that was circulated by Peter Bukowski saying, and it's a screenshot of an article that I believe he wrote, but it is from an anonymous scout talking about Darnell Wright out of Tennessee, saying he's a talented underachiever, not great football character. You could hit on him if he has an epiphany and becomes a pro. He's got a shitload of talent, but there's a lot of entitlement with this kid. But he did shut out Alabama's Will Anderson. Absolutely, if you want to like him, that's the tape you point to and say that guy's a starting left or right tackle, case closed. But when you dig into it, he's never been much of a worker, barely does enough to get by, not super cooperative. Hard work is not in his vocabulary. This goes on and on. That's not even half of it that I've read, but this is basically saying the talent is there, but he's an underachiever. And from a football character standpoint, he's a massive concern. Now, it's an anonymous scout, so the anonymity, there's some element of tepidness there. But for a scout to say this on or off the record, to be so strong in their wording about a guy from a character standpoint, scouts in the NFL aren't super quick to do that very often. So if they come out that strong on somebody, there's got to be some fire where that smoke is. So I think that teams should be wary of him, and the Titans in particular, a team coming off of still going through the PTSD of an Isaiah Wilson situation from past seasons. You may not want a guy that has a lot of similar character concerns or reportedly may have similar character concerns. So I think Darnell Wright maybe should be off the board for a team like the Titans.
Another guy who should probably be off the board for the Titans at 11 specifically is Broderick Jones. And that's just saying mostly because I think at 11, there's probably going to be some better options. However, if you were to trade down and take Broderick Jones because guys like Darnell Wright are skyrocketing up people's boards, I think you could find some value there and still have a pretty good stud at left tackle there. I just think the value at 11 is probably a little too high for him. But I know there are a lot of teams around that 15 to 19 range who also would really like his services. So it might be a little tricky, but just at 11, the value for me is just a little bit off.
No, I agree. All right, now that we've gone into detail on the number of first round outcomes, let's get through these later rounds. We'll speed up a little bit here as we go so that we're not here all day long. But just a couple of thoughts on each of these guys. In the second round, we've got 4 positions we're talking about: receivers, tight ends, linemen, and defenders. In terms of receivers, my do draft player, JT, is Cedric Tillman. Now, some would argue this would be an overdraft. Why would you get him at 41 where the Titans are? Some might argue that the better Tennessee receiver would potentially still be there, and you'd be drafting the second best Tennessee player. My argument is that he's actually the better prospect. I think Cedric Tillman is a significantly better NFL prospect than Jalen Hyatt is, and I would take him over Hyatt, and I would draft Tillman as soon as 41 because, frankly, I'm not confident Tillman's going to be there in the third round. I think that the NFL is going to be high on him with his rare size, speed combination that he's got, especially rare in this draft class where we've got so many small players. I said this with Austin Gale the other day. He's kind of the last stop of the train in terms of decent size at the top of the draft. If you don't get him, you're going to get somebody that's a little bit smaller. And I think Tillman is a guy with some size worth considering for the Titans. He'd be a really, really nice compliment to Treylon Burks as the Y receiver.
Receiver that I think the Titans should look at in the second round is Josh Downs. Now, I know Josh Downs has been an interesting name as he's received no top 30 visits from any teams at all this entire draft process. I
still have no idea how, but yeah.
My thing with him, which is going to be the opposite of my guy that I wouldn't draft, is he's small, but he knows how to run routes really effectively. I think the Titans should consider a guy who is a specialist in running routes, because that's something they've struggled with for quite a while now, ever since Well, since AJ Brown was there last year, we saw it a lot.
Yeah.
And he doesn't have the size, but he has that route running ability that I think merits a second round grade.
I agree. My second round don't draft receiver is kind of in line with the counterpoint, the opposite of my do draft second round player. Whereas I think Cedric Tillman is a big bodied guy worth taking in the second round. Jonathan Mingo out of Ole Miss is a guy that I have kind of changed my opinion on a little bit through this draft process. And he's a guy that I don't think is worth taking in the second round. Now, if he's there in the third, I actually think that he may be worth considering. But the reason why I have him as a don't draft player and why I have him in the second round is because his stock has risen pretty significantly in the past 2 weeks. We had Peter Schrager coming out with his first mock draft this past week that many clowned, but Schrager is a connected guy, and he had Mingo in his first round, like at the 29th or 30th position. So I think teams are going to be higher on him, and maybe artificially so. His stock may be inflated by the fact that he is one of the rare guys with size in this draft class who's also very athletic. The issue for me is I don't think that his development track warrants a second round pick. I think that he has some real consistency issues that concern you, and I don't see him being an immediate impact receiver. That's why I don't think he's worth taking a second round swing on. I think that the Titans can find guys that can be an impact much sooner in the second round than Jonathan Mingo.
My guy that I don't think the Titans should draft in the second round is Jalen Hyatt, for the same reason as he's small,
with you, man.
but he cannot run routes. Can
he play in the NFL, right? Is he an NFL player? We don't know.
It's hard to say, mostly because Cedric Tillman played in the same offense, and while the route running ability can call into question, with him, he's got the size, where Jalen Hyatt just has the speed and is going to probably take a little bit to acclimate to the NFL level. If you're using a second round pick on a guy that you need to make an impact immediately, I don't think he is your guy.
I agree. Let's do tight ends. The second round tight end that I think the Titans should consider drafting. Not going to go with the one I've talked about in the past, but JT, you probably are. I'm going with Sam Laporta. I've grown on Laporta quite a bit in the past couple of weeks. Hadn't really dug into him until later in this process, but this guy is, if you're looking for a true seam threat at the tight end position, this guy is a seam threat, a yards after the catch monster. My only concern would be, do he and Chig play too similar a role? You would need one of them to be more of a inline blocking threat. And I think that you could arguably try to mold either of the two into that. Laporta is somebody that is just so talented as a receiver, though, that I don't hate the idea of a little bit of redundancy if the Titans were to grab him. And then suddenly you've got two stud tight end that are receiving talents and you can use in the receiving game and shoot. If you want to use them as pseudo slot receivers half the time, knock yourself out, because I think Laporta is just that talented.
Yeah, the tight end that I'm going to go with, because as I started to say, a little bit of slip, he could also probably play a wide receiver role on this team, is Darnell Washington. Darnell Washington, now I don't think he's going to be there, but if he was at 41 or 42... Are you
starting to think he's gone by there as well?
I think so as well. I wouldn't be surprised if a team in the back or end of the first round takes him there. To be honest, we could see 3 tight ends go in the first round. If you told me he was the second tight end off the board, it wouldn't blow my mind. It wouldn't.
I'd be able to believe it.
Yeah, it wouldn't shock me either. However, dude's just an athletic freak. Go back to his combine tape. Yep. He just kind of balled out there.
But find that one screenshot of him with the one-handed catch on the sideline.
Yeah,
that's really all you need to see. That sums it up.
If there's a guy in this draft who is super versatile and can be your run blocking tight end and mix of wide receiver threat, it's Darnell Washington. Had an 81.3 run blocking grade last season. This dude can do all of it. He's big. He's athletic. He's the guy I would want in the second round.
The guy that I think the Titans shouldn't be considering in the second round at the tight end position is Luke Musgrave out of Oregon State. He's a guy that's been dealing with injury. We only got to see 2 games out of him due to this undisclosed knee injury that cost him the majority of his 2022 season. He's a vertical threat, but with a guy who's got this lingering knee injury that's kept him out of a lot of off-season and, pre-draft activities. We've not gotten to see him do much of anything. So it's very much a projection at this point, and he's not a great route runner. So the fact that he's a vertical threat tight end smaller-ish guy, 6'6", 253 though. So he's not, he's a crazy tall guy, but he's not got necessarily the bulk of a tight end at that height. It's because he's this awesome size speed combo, and he is super quick when he's healthy. But that knee injury, the fact that we've not seen him, the fact that he's not going to be an inline blocking threat really at all, and is not a great route runner. He's mainly a vertical threat. That doesn't seem like something the Titans should be interested in. And I also think it's too risky a player to consider in the second round for a team that needs an impact player now.
Yeah, my tight end that I wouldn't draft in the second round, and this might be a cop-out because he's probably also gone by the first round anyways, it's Dalton Kincaid. However, I am kind of on the opposite side of the coin here, where Dalton Kincaid is not what the Titans would need, even if they were to consider him, I don't know, if they were to trade up or something for a tight end. Right. He's not the guy I would want either. He's not a run blocker, which you would like to see him have a little bit more versatility. But he just lacks a little bit more of that size. The run blocking isn't there. And you obviously have the injury concerns that he's dealt with the entire draft process. That's just kind of a mix that I don't think the Titans would like to have in their room.
Let's talk second round offensive lineman. The guy that I think the Titans should be interested in is Steve Avila out of TCU. I'll reference our buddy Stoney Keeley's pro comp for him, which is the Juggernaut. If you're into superheroes and comics, you'll know that one. Just picture a really big beefed up, kind of like the Iron Man suit when he has the mega suit to fight the Hulkbuster suit. That's kind of what Steve Avila is. If you need another image, dude's just massive. Okay, Steve Avila is a bowling ball of a player out of TCU, played a ton inside, definitely an interior player, but at the guard position, I think he's one of the safest picks in this class at 332 pounds, 6'3". This guy's anchor is incredible. You could play him at guard or center, and he's pretty talented in both the run and the pass game, but in particular, a really, really talented pass blocker, something the Titans could use a good boost in that category. So I like Steve Avila a lot.
The tackle or offensive lineman that I would really like the Titans to draft in the second round is Cody Mock. We've talked a lot about him, but there may not be
versatility, baby.
Exactly. He's got versatility. He's got the athleticism.
Titans are a fan of that.
They love the versatility and athleticism. He would be a home run pick in the second round if they went with wide receiver or another position in the first. He would shore up that. He's kind of like the same situation with Peter Skoronski. He would shore up that offensive line, whether they would sit him at a left guard, left tackle, maybe even give him a little bit at center. Like if someone goes down on this line, he's your guy from the get-go to just plug and play wherever you want, because he does have that versatility.
The lineman that I think they shouldn't consider in the second round is a guy that I don't think either of us have been really high on him this whole process, but I've been particularly low on him. It's Osiris Torrance out of Florida. On tape, it does not wow me. I don't understand what the love for him is. I don't see a lot of skill or talent or prowess there besides just being a big bodied guard. He's just in the way and just kind of stood there and won on his size. I think won a lot, due to the fact that he was physically outclassing his opponent, as opposed to not physically, but just like his mass was too much for his opponent. He wasn't physically putting the beat down on guys in the way that you would necessarily want a guy of a high second round caliber guard to. It's kind of hard to explain, but just his foot quickness, his hand placement. He's very robotic in his movements. He doesn't really he's not a big pancake guy, so he doesn't win dramatically very often. I don't see a lot of fire in his gameplay. He's just boring to me, and I think that there are way better options for the Titans. Luckily, I think that he'll be gone by then. I think a team will take a swing on him earlier, but I don't think that he's a great fit for the Titans at all.
My do not draft offensive line guy in the second round is DeJuan Jones, who I'll use the same thing with our friend Stoney Keeley, who gave him the comp of DeWandre the Giant, which I think was a pretty good play on words, and is also a very good comp,
very accurate, because
this dude is the biggest and the biggest frame of any offensive lineman in this draft. And I think that's honestly what might knock him down a little bit for the Titans. He played mostly at right tackle. That's where he's played the last 2 seasons. So you're not going to be able to, I just don't think he's going to have success if you were to plug and play him at a different position. It's kind of just not what the Titans need right now, is a guy who mainly played on the right side of the line. And I just think he's got the size, but the athleticism he didn't really wow me with it at the combine and through his pro days. So he's a guy that I think also is not going to be there in the second round. I think someone also might take a swing on him in the late first. But if he were there, I just don't think he really has a fit with the Titans.
The last position position group that we'll talk about for second rounders is potential defenders. Now, I know Titans fans aren't going to want defenders really at all in this draft, but they're going to come. And I expect the Titans to be interested in defenders because that's just the nature of Mike Vrabel, and it's the nature of this team to be more balanced than the fan base wants them to be. So if they were to go defender in the second round, I considered a lot of cornerbacks, JT. And there are guys out there that I love. If Emmanuel Forbes at Mississippi State is still there, I don't think that he will be, but if he is, I would not hate that pick at all. The one I went with is Keanu Benton, defensive lineman out of Wisconsin. This guy defines versatility as well, and it's one of the reasons why I think that he'd work well with this Titans regime, this new Titans regime. Very versatile defensive tackle. Split his snaps in college pretty evenly between the A gap and the B gap. Over the course of his entire career, he can fill that same role in the NFL, I think, pretty easily. 6'4", 309. He's a big fella that's got very great hand usage. The placement is a little bit spotty at times, but he's strong and he's violent, and he's probably one of the best, if not the best, pass rushing defensive lineman in this class. Had a 13.3% pass rush win rate last season, which is in elite territory. So I think Keanu Benton would be an awesome addition to the Titans pass rush.
My second round guy that I think they should consider looking at is BJ Ojulari. We talked about him a little bit earlier this season as a guy who's just kind of gone under the radar for a lot of us. He's not a guy who is talked about a lot. However, I think he could be a very valuable piece on that offense or that defensive line there. Dude's super fast, super twitchy, just has a lot of moves already in his toolbox that I think you put him on a line with guys like Jeffrey Simmons and Tierre Tart, he's going to fit right in with them, and he's going to maybe not be a starter from the get-go, but as a rotational piece to start his first season, I think he makes an impact and is a guy I think they should look at.
The guy that I think on defense the Titans should not be tempted by in the second round is Trenton Simpson out of Clemson. Speaking of Clemson players, he's a great mover, and he's a pretty big physical linebacker, 6'2", 235. There are things to like about him. He's a rangy, fluid athlete, the kind of thing on paper you're looking for in a linebacker. But I don't think that his dual threat versatility warrants taking him in the second round, especially for a Titans team that I don't think linebacker is super high on their list of needs. His pass rushing ability might tempt them, and that's the reason why I bring him up here, because he is a relatively decent pass rusher and a very good tackler. It's the fact that I don't think he's got the zone coverage instincts or ability that you're really wanting in a guy that you can trust to be a 3-down linebacker out there. And if you're going to take a linebacker in the second round, you want them to be a 3-down guy, a full-time player. He can get kind of stuck in the mud when he's got to do some high-level processing that on tape shows itself too often. I don't love the idea of Trenton Simpson for the Titans.
Yeah, my guy here is going to be Tuli Tuipulotu. He's a guy that
A plus stick the landing on that name, by the way. Well done.
Thank you. Try my best, mostly because I don't want to pronounce that name going forward for the Titans.
One and done.
That's not,
we can just we can splice that for future reference. If they do draft him, we'll just take that soundbite and cut and paste.
Yeah,
every time
exactly.
You bring him up.
There you go. Yeah. Perfect. Wonderful. He's a guy that doesn't play as big as he's listed. I feel like he plays a little bit under his size, and also just posted a 31.4% missed tackle rate last season. Not someone I think Titans fans want to be seeing on the field next year. I can just see them like him missing a tackle, and then it's like just a huge narrative with him. Here we go. Definitely not a guy I would have them take in the second round.
All right, we're moving on into the third round. We've got a lot of names to get through here and not a lot of time, so we'll continue to keep it briefer and briefer. But we do want to mention a handful of people that we think you should consider for the Titans in later rounds. You know, this is the area we're getting into here where folks are less and less familiar with these guys, but we've done the legwork and we are familiar with some guys that the Titans should and shouldn't be targeting here in the later rounds. In the third round for receivers, the guy that I think the Titans should be considering and the guy that they clearly are considering is Tyler Scott, wide receiver out of Cincinnati, 177 pounds, 5'10". This guy is a former running back, and he plays like one a little bit. He's a very sharp route runner. He's got the build of a guy, despite not being the biggest fella. He's got a durable build. He's got a strong build. He's got a physical and athletic build that I think the Titans are a big fan of. It's very much a body type that resembles the way that they like to play football. Had 9 touchdowns this past year, 55 catches for 900 yards. I can see him being a day one impact player for the Titans. The number that sticks out most for me, contested catch rate, 55%. For a guy of that size, that stature, that weight, that is an impressive number. Guy's got a little dog in him despite not being the biggest fella.
Yeah, my guy in the third round here is A.T. Perry, another guy who is one of these
slightly
guys
bigger guy.
Slightly bigger guy at 6'3", 198 pounds there.
Yep. Diamond in the rough of size.
He's another guy I think that is going to be one of these few and far between guys who you can plug and play and is going to have some production from day one. Some of these other guys who are a little bit smaller, I think might take a little bit more time for them to get up to that NFL level, but A.T. Perry has the skills. He's got that deep threat ability that I think the Titans should look at.
The guy that I don't think the Titans should consider in the third round at receiver, and I'll keep this one super short, it's Nathaniel Dell out of Houston. His size and speed combination just does not cut it for me. That's literally the whole evaluation. 5'8", 165 pounds. And the dude is, all of his athletic testing numbers are below average. He's not got the speed you have to have at that size for me to consider you in the third round. He's the death knell combo of unathletic, not big enough, I'll pass.
Yeah, my third round guy is Kayshon Boutte, who was a guy coming into this year.
Talk about a layup as to why you don't want to draft this guy. Yeah, love this one.
He's a guy who came into the year as maybe a top 15 pick and just absolutely did not look like it. Now, he did have ankle surgery last year, and he looked like a totally different player. Had a 12.7% drop rate last year, only 1.49 yards per route run. Dude went to the combine and still just dropped a lot of balls. Did not look great. He was not as good as the other guys there.
Not great. No, he did not.
He was not great. And no. I just think he's a guy that for right now, where people think he's going in the third round, he should not be considered there.
The tight end that I think the Titans should consider in the third round is Luke Schoonmaker, Luke Schoolbus, as we've been referring to him as on this show. He's out of Michigan, and I love this guy as a dual threat player, a value tight end that the Titans could add and finally round out this tight end room. We've talked about how they have their true receiving threat in Chig. They have their true inline blocking, glorified extra tackle that they picked up in free agency, whose name I still have not learned. And then they need a guy who can kind of be that in-betweener, a passing threat and an inline blocker. Schoonmaker can be that guy. He is a big enough bodied fella at 251, 6'5". He's an experienced player. He's going to be able to, I think, impact the game year one, if not day one. I like him a lot.
A guy I think they should also consider is another guy around that size, and Zach Kuntz, who is 6'7", 255.
I like Kuntz as well.
He just doesn't have the route running or playmaking ability that someone like Luke Schoolbus has. But he does have the run blocking here, a 67.5% run blocking grade from last season. He's still got the versatility and could be worth a third round flyer.
All right, we've now entered the territory where we came together and had to put our heads together for some of these guys. We couldn't come up with, or we didn't want to, frankly, talk about two guys at each position at some of these later rounds. The guy we agreed the Titans shouldn't consider at tight end in the third round is Josh Wiley, tight end out of Cincinnati. Do you want to take this one, talk about why Titans maybe shouldn't consider him?
He just,
it's Josh a redundancy thing for me.
It really is. He just doesn't flash anywhere like some of these other guys do in this third round. If they took him in the third round, I hope they know something, because some other team is going to take him in the third round probably, and I just don't see why.
When he's not going to offer that blocking prowess at all.
Not at all.
He's going to be taking time from Chig, and I think that he's probably not as good as Chig, so it would be kind of a dumb one to go with, in my opinion. The third round offensive lineman that I want the Titans to consider is Chandler Zavala. He's out of North Carolina, correct?
Yes.
Or excuse me,
State.
UNC, or yeah, UNC. NC State. UNC State. I'm combining the two. I like Zavala a lot. He's kind of one of my guys who's kind of a sleeper in terms of lineman. He's going to be an interior guy, 6'5", 325 pounds. But this past season, he allowed just 1 hit and 0 sacks and 3 hurries, despite playing on a team where he was the best lineman and was not getting any help. He was certainly being put on an island a whole lot, despite being a guard. So I think that he's a guy that you can plug in on the interior day one, and he's going to be pretty effective.
A guy that I'm going to maybe take a flyer on here in the third round is Jalen Duncan out of Maryland. He didn't have the best year last year, allowed 7 sacks, 4 hits, and 17 hurries.
Yeah.
Yes. But he has the raw talent, and he's definitely a project. He might be worth it, though. I think down the line, he could find his way onto an offensive line. But for right now, he definitely is a project, but I think I'd take a flyer on him.
The player we agreed the Titans shouldn't be considering in terms of linemen in the third round was Andrew Voorhees out of USC. Now, if he hadn't torn his ACL on the field in Indianapolis in front of us, then I would have been much higher on him. I was higher on him at the time. I liked how he was performing in the drills before he went down. I thought that he was impressive, and then unfortunately he tore his ACL. So that's really the reason why the Titans shouldn't consider him. You don't know how he's going to come back, and he's not going to be able to impact the team at all in this first year. He's going to be a luxury pick, and frankly, a very good pick for some team that can afford to sit on him, like the Eagles. Will probably end up getting him in the second or the third round and sit on him, and he'll be a good lineman in the future. But that's not something the Titans can afford to do right now. JT, who is a defender that or do you want me to take this one since I'm kind of the Clark Phillips guy?
Yeah, well, you said
okay. I was about to say, Clark Phillips. I almost threw it to you, but I'll let you take the defender the Titans shouldn't take in the third round because you did come up with it. Clark Phillips is the guy I think they should consider in the third round. If you're looking for somebody that can be a stud slot cornerback in the NFL, Clark Phillips is your guy out of Utah. Talked to him at the combine, was very impressed by his football character, impressed by him on the field. His size is going to limit him to be more a slot only player, but you can't ever argue with adding a true starting level talent cornerback in the draft. And I think that he is a guy you can get in the third round who has just that. So I like Clark Phillips a lot. Who's the defender you thought the Titans shouldn't consider in the third round, JT?
Anyone with a safety designation at their position.
Any safety. And why would that be?
any safety. The value's just not there, man. There's going to be 2 that should be probably taken in the first or second round. After that, there's just really no value there.
It's all a lot of these guys, 7th round guys, flyers.
It really, if it isn't right now, it really should be. I'm just not seeing a lot on this, guys. It's probably the weakest class of every position in this draft. And if they use a pick on a safety before the 5th round, I'd be shocked.
All right. Moving on to day 3, 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th round. We don't have a guy at every position here, but a couple of names at different positions we wanted to mention that we have opinions on. A receiver I think that they should consider, and we've skipped the 4th round, by the way, because the Titans don't have a 4th round pick right now. So if they get one, cool, awesome. But right now we're going to go based on what they have. And so the 5th round wide receiver I think that they should consider is Andre Iosivas. I know that there are folks that think this guy doesn't have it. Our guy Zach Lyons is not a fan of him, and he let me know that on Twitter this past week. And he, to be fair, his opinion is also based on what he saw at the Senior Bowl, and it sounds like the body language, the character concerns with Iosivas might exist, but from a measurement standpoint, he's one of the rare guys with size that you can get on day 3 in this wide receiver class that I think is talented enough. And frankly, the tape is so hard to find on him. I think folks just have not watched him much. He's literally out here tweeting his own tape so that people can see, because he doesn't have the tape out there. So Iosivas, 6'3", 205. I like him as a late day 3 ad at the receiver position.
Day 3 guy that could be anywhere between the 5th or 6th round is Puka Nacua, someone that Zach Lyons and Stoney really
the Senior Bowl
like
loved.
The
they did like that guy. Yeah,
he's a guy that I saw had really good fluidity in his route running at the combine. He's someone I would look at in the late rounds. He doesn't exactly have the size, but he's really good at running his routes, which is why he might be a good flyer.
Let's move on to tight ends. The tight end I think the Titans should consider in the 5th round is Payne Durham. Been talking about him quite a bit, but Durham is a guy that if you're looking for both a receiving and blocking threat, he's worth taking. When you watch him on tape, and we talked about this with our guy James Foster on the tight end episode this past week, he's kind of like if Jeff Swaim didn't have bricks for hands. He's like if Jeff Swaim had decent hands and was an actual threat in the receiving game. He's also more, I think, athletically gifted than Jeff Swaim was. I think he's literally just an upgraded Jeff Swaim, which is cool because that's the role the Titans need filled. They need that Jeff Swaim role filled. That's the position they are currently auditioning to hire for. I think Payne Durham could be a really nice guy to fill into that slot out of Purdue.
A guy that I think that they could look into not taking, because I would definitely not want them to take it, is Cameron Latu. He's the tight end out of Alabama. Dude looked okay in his pass blocking tape. Didn't really stand out to me, but there just really is no production from a passing game there, especially having Bryce Young as your quarterback. You'd like to see a little bit more there. He didn't really have any.
And he's playing on a rare Bama team that actually didn't have a lot of receiver talent. So like he should have been an outlet a lot of the time, and he wasn't.
Yeah, so that's just why I'm not super high on him.
I agree. A 5th round lineman I think that they should consider is Braden Daniels. We've talked about him quite a bit. We know our guy Stoney Keeley's got a big crush on him out of Utah. Braden Daniels is an interior guy for sure, but I do think that he's somebody that is a tackle to guard transfer convert in the NFL that can be a day one contributor. 6'4", 294. He's a junior. He's going to be 23 this season. And this past season, he allowed 0 sacks and just 1 quarterback hit. He's a guy that I think you could move inside and be a day one starter and be a talented one at that. A better pass blocker than run blocker as well. So that's something that could help boost some run blocking prowess into the Titans offensive line. Lord knows they need it. Who's a lineman you think they shouldn't consider, JT?
Jordan McFadden, once again, a Clemson guy on a pretty bad Clemson team. He got beat a lot last year, allowing 4 sacks, 1 hit, 8 hurries. He didn't have the raw talent that I've seen a lot of these later guys have, especially in his pro day and combine. Just not a guy that I really liked. He definitely has some. He doesn't have a lot of good stats on him that really just have him jump out. He had a 59.8 gap grade, just an okay run blocking grade, especially what the Titans need is a good run blocker. He just didn't really wow me in those areas, and that's why I wouldn't take him.
The defender I think that the Titans should be interested in, and I think that it's one that they absolutely are interested in. It's Ivan Pace Jr., linebacker out of Cincinnati. This guy is literally just your next David Long. He's your next standard issue David Long. He's a 5th round grade because he's undersized. He's the smallest guy in this entire linebacker class that I think is even worth considering drafting. 5'10", 231, short and not very bulky. But he's got a 6-foot wingspan, so the arms make up for the lack of size, and he's a gamer. Besides his size, nothing else in his game is a concern. He's a true 3-down linebacker. He's got an above average coverage grade, a truly elite pass rush grade, and a slightly less elite, but still in the elite territory, run defense grade. So in the run, in the rush, in coverage, this guy's awesome. He's just not that big. Who cares? Let him ball. I think you should consider him in the 5th round.
A guy that I would not consider in the 5th round is Kytrell Clark, a cornerback out of Louisville. He's a guy that's been rising up a bunch of people's boards just because of his outstanding play at the Shrine Bowl. He's been a kind of an off-draft combine sweetheart for a lot of people. He's been someone that's risen up boards. He's played maybe the most snaps of any cornerback in this entire class coming into the NFL draft, and he just... his production this year dropped off massively. He has a lot of glaring holes, allowed 7 touchdowns this past season. Just not a guy that I want to bet on his traits alone.
All right, 4 guys we want to mention here in the 6th round. The offensive lineman I think the Titans should consider in the 6th round is Sidy So out of Eastern Michigan, an Eastern Michigan Eagle. He's a guard that I think is being underrated simply because no one watches the Eastern Michigan Eagles. But when you watch the tape, and our buddy Stoney Keeley is the one that put me onto this guy I was watching some and I'm like, oh yeah, I see it. I think this guy could be an impact player at the NFL that you find deep in the 6th round, a value add for sure. This past season, he allowed 2 sacks and 3 hits with just 12 hurries on almost 1,000 snaps. I think that he's somebody that can play in the NFL and is just being overlooked.
Let's move on now to our 6th round defender, who we think that the Titans should take. It's Yasir Abdullah. You're a big fan of his.
I am. I just realized that I'm going back to back here. So let me pull up the notes on him. But I talked about him in my mock draft 1.0 episode as an edge player out of Louisville the Titans could consider in the late part of the draft. He's a great pass rusher, has an elite 90.8 pass rush grade this past season and a 21.2% pass rush win rate. That's a number that should stand out for any edge player that you can get in the 6th round. I think Yasir Abdullah, while not a true starter, would be a really nice rotational add at the edge position.
A wide receiver in the 6th or 7th round that the Titans could take a flyer on. Jalen Wayne, South Alabama, the Jaguars. Did not know that was a school before doing all of this research coming into the draft season.
Yeah,
but
baby.
Here we are. Jalen Wayne, for going to a school that didn't have a lot of production last year, he had production. He had 57 receptions on 100 targets for 812 yards, a good 14.2 yards per reception, 9 touchdowns, all best of his career. He could be a guy that they take a flyer on late in the draft and could have some benefits down the road.
I'll knock out 2 birds with 1 stone here. 2 guys I think you shouldn't consider at wide receiver in the 6th or 7th round. Matt Landers out of Arkansas and Justin Shorter out of Florida. Both of these guys on paper are going to confuse you when you look at them because you pull up, all right, Matt Landers. Let's see why is he such a low grade? Wait a minute, 6'4", 200 pounds, and he runs in the 4.3s. Holy cow! Why is this guy not higher up on people's boards? When you watch the tape, he's just so unrefined. He's kind of awkward and lanky and in a frame that he doesn't have great control over, and he's not somebody that's going to have an impact on special teams. He's just not athletic in that way. He's just a straight line track athlete receiver with a big body, but he's not really much of a football player. It's a lot of the same thing with Justin Shorter out of Florida. He's somebody that on paper, you're like, why is this guy not going to be a good NFL receiver? Okay, he's 6'4", 229 pounds, even bigger bodied guy, played with Anthony Richardson this past year. What's the deal? He only had 2 touchdowns and 29 receptions. Again, not super athletic, not a great athlete, somebody that you're going to want to put on special teams, not somebody that has great control of his body, really, really unpolished, unfinished product as a route runner. All of these things are concerning, and the reasons why both of them, while on paper, you're going to be tempted to take a flyer on the athlete, you're not going to want them on your team because I don't think that they're going to be great receivers.
2 more here as we round out these final 2 flyer players that the Titans could look for in the 7th round. So if you see this come across the board and they take one of these, you heard it here first. And that's I'm gonna take an offensive lineman here, in Earl Bostic Jr., a tackle out of Kansas. He was a guy that went in the combine with the group of Paris Johnson Jr., DeJuan Jones, Broderick Jones, end of list of guys who were the top echelon of guys.
Right.
My next guy who really wowed me at the combine during those drills was Earl Bostic Jr. I thought he hung with them in a lot of the drills, and he's going to be available in the 7th round. And if the Titans want to add some depth to that offensive line room, which I think they do, Earl Bostic Jr. might be a good choice for a 7th round flyer or maybe an undrafted free agent.
And finally, the defensive flyer that I wouldn't mind in the 7th round is Dante Stills, defensive lineman out of West Virginia. Talked about him in one of my mock draft episodes this past week. He's a guy at 286, 6'3". He's a senior, but he's only 23 years old. I can see this guy coming in and being a really nice rotational player on your defensive line, particularly as a run defender. He's a big body that gets in the way. And if you're just looking for a big body guy that can be a good run defender, maybe a 2-down player in your defensive line rotation, I would not hate a flyer on Dante Stills at all. All right, that's going to round it out, JT. We went a little bit longer than we anticipated, but I think that this provides a great baseline for folks that want to have folks in mind as they're watching the draft, not just on day 1 or on day 2, but on day 2 and 3, when we get into the back end, some folks that they can be targeting, can be rooting for their team to and not to take. So hopefully we were able to provide that. We've got more shows every day leading up to the draft this Thursday where we'll be live. You'll want to check out the live stream on the first 2 nights at least with JT and I and some special guests, including Stoney Keeley of the Sobros Network. Until then, for producer JT, I'm your host, Easton Freeze. This has been the Hot Read Podcast. We'll talk to you again tomorrow.